All right, welcome back. We are COMP125, that's client-side web development in the summer 2020 semester at Centennial. And it's week 10, part 1 of our broadcast. We're going to start talking about state and information security today a little bit. We're going to finish that off on Wednesday. But first, before we get there, let's take a look and see what we've got going on. So if we go to assessments, you can see that we have our mini portfolio JSON data assignment that was given to you guys. That was given out last week and it's due August the 7th. Hopefully you guys are working on that and trying to get that going. So last week we focused a lot on how to set up your environment for a single page application, which is what we did mostly. Okay, so if you remember, we had this folder right here, and let's pull that up. There we go. And this folder, this is from last week. What we ended up doing, if I run this from last week, and if I do light-server, whenever it feels like not syncing up, then what I'm going to get is this site, right, which is a single page application that mimics what it's like to be a multi-page application. That's what it's like. And this is a popular approach used by front-end frameworks. And this is some of what we talked about last week. So please see the last videos or last week's videos if you haven't had a chance to come to class last week or whatever. I know most of you have. I see the list here. I recognize the names. Okay, so this is what we kind of did last week, and this week what we want to talk about starting out is a couple of things. So one thing before we get into the PowerPoint is we've been using this structure. I told you that there was no module structure necessarily that does something that looks like this. There is no module structure like this, not really. But there is an Es6 module pattern. It just doesn't protect things this way. It doesn't create a namespace. Instead, what it does is each file is considered its own module. So if I was going to add more files to the objects module, well, that wouldn't be possible, right? I wouldn't be able to have additional objects. It'd be their own namespace. So I'm going to show you another way, an alternate way of using a module pattern with ES 2015, 2016, 2017, and so on. So outside of this iffy module pattern. And what I mean by that is I want to expose the contact. That's what's going to happen, right? Just like we have here. We only have one class inside of this file, contact. I want to expose the contact class. That's what I want to do. But only the contact class inside of this folder, right? So we're going to talk about how to do this. Okay. So we're going to use a few keywords. One of them is going to be the import keyword, and the other one is going to be the export keyword. Okay, and we're going to restructure this class. The way you do that, and by the way, you can still use the same structure we have here, objects and so on, but we're going to take this away. We're going to leave the use strict in there. Okay. And we're just going to fix up this module so it doesn't have this part here at all. Okay, so all we have now, again, I'm looking at last week's code. You know what? Before we get there, just to be prudent, instead of me going to last week's code, let's make a copy of last week's code. That might be a better way of doing it. How about that? We'll make a copy of last week's code. It doesn't like me making copies of last week's code. Let's refresh. That's a sandbox. And you know what I better do is, if I'm going to make a copy of last week's code, let's kill the node modules folder, because that would be bad if I try and make a copy with node modules. There's just so many files, right? So one thing I like to do whenever I make copies of stuff with node modules is definitely kill the node modules folder. Kill it, because you can always get it back, right? You can just like do an npm install and you're good to go. Right, or a yarn install or whatever. So here I'm just making a new lesson, lesson 10, Okay, so less than 10. Going to run off this lesson for today. A couple things we need to do here to do what we have to do. One thing, I'm just going to bring up the command prompt here, is, and I'm going to do this, actually I'll do that in VS Code today. I'm a little bit indecisive. I don't know, what can I tell you? You guys are still joining anyway, so we're still pretty good. Do not show this on startup. Thank you very much. I don't need to see that on startup every time. All right. So yeah, this is less than 10, which means I got to make some changes. I got to change this to less than 10. This should say less than 10, as well as my README should probably say less than 10 and less than 10. Okay, so there we go. So I've changed a couple things that tell me it's less than 10, but guess what? Our Git repository, right, is still pointing to the previous one. And if I do git remote, you can see that I have two repositories. One that's Centennial College. Remember, this is the one that we push to so we can see our functionality. And Origin is our is the repo that we're working with, the active repo. Think about this as the staging area, Centennial College, or the distribution maybe, and this would be kind of our development branch right here, Origin. So we want to remove Origin. Just want to say git remote remove Origin. Get rid of that. We want to add back the Origin branch, or the Origin remote, but we want to make one. So again, I'm up here on Centennial. Going to make a new repository and make it public. Somehow I remember this time. And M2020 less than 10. I'm just going to type that in, which should give us this. All I need is these last two lines of code to add the Origin remote, which I'll do here, and then we'll push to the Origin remote. I'm not changing the Centennial remote. That one we'll push to as well when we're done doing our changes, right? So notice also there's like 2,000 files that are here because we're still tracking node modules. So I'm going to say something like git add dot git commit -m, and we're going to say updated project settings, like we normally do. It's kind of stuff that takes away all those problems, and we're ready to go now. Okay, so back to what I was saying. So I want to go into my scripts folder here now that I've got my new project, lesson 10. I'm going to go into my scripts folder, and under contact.js, get rid of the IFI, is what I'm saying. Don't let the IFI and the let objects here be there. Just leave the class in place and the use strict. Okay, so all this stuff here should be gone. And we'll just kind of put this back in here so we can kind of space bar. So if I did this, what this does is it exposes the class to the entire browser cache. All right, that's what it does. So I can always go to the contact class when I run this thing and access it. But what I want to use is the export keyword, right? So I can export this class, this contact class, as a module. I want to export the contact class as a module, the ES6 way. Okay? So we have to make a couple of changes. One of them is inside of the index.html. Now we talked about this when we said, hey, you know what? We have a script tag with a contact class, and we can say that the type is equal to module, right? So this is ECMAScript 2015, 2016, whatever. And if you want to see that, if it's used, we talked about this before. Let me just refresh this page so you can see it. And by the way, I might as well, since I'm here, put this up as the weeks 10 GitHub repo, so you can always go and see it, which is important to me. So you can always have your code as an example, okay? Because you're going to need it at some point. GitHub link for week 10. Okay. Since I'm here, I might as well do that. Here we go. Yeah. So, so if I do can I use .com, if I go there and if I typed in module, Again, this is the module pattern that we can see in the script, and it says loading JavaScript modules dynamically using import syntax. You can see that this is 90% effective, Opera Mini, and so on. JavaScript modules via the script tag. Again, this is 92% effective, and it kind of talks about how that's done, and where the type is module. Okay, this is what I'm doing here. Script type is equal to module, and I want to load via my script tag. Now, again, is it totally supported? No, it's pretty good globally. Things that won't support is old Opera Mobile. It won't work. The Android browser, you see the built-in browser for Android. The Chrome Android, no problem. All the newer browsers are pretty good. Some other ones won't support it because they haven't been updated. And old IE doesn't support. Older versions of the browsers, they don't support. But all the new ones, they're pretty good. Okay. Now you can see this is the thing. What's the usage globally of Edge 84? Well, it's like 0%. So you have to step back a sec and say, okay, what's the biggest usage? So here's globally iOS Safari 4.95% globally. Chrome is 31%. So this previous version, not the current version, but the previous version also supports anything from version 61 to 83 supports these changes, 31% of them. Again, not so much Firefox. Firefox, only the latest versions of Firefox will support this script. And this is without using some kind of translation device like Babel. We'll talk about later on. All right. So that's why I'm using them. I'm just telling you that from a usability perspective, we're getting better. All the latest browsers have support for the script tag. Okay, and it's a pretty good support if you've adopted the latest browser, and even upcoming browsers. Browser versions, for example, Safari, the bleeding edge version, anything from 85 to 87 for Chrome and Firefox and so on. All the new browsers, and even the current version of Edge, they all support this script tag. So I think for future fit, it's not a bad way of doing it. And what this does is will allow us to use this type module here in our script and use ECMAScript 2015, 2016, 2017, all the way to 2020 features of the module pattern. So this is the first step. If you don't mark it as a module, Visual Studio Code will complain. Okay, so that's the first thing. So now, because it's a module, right, what we can do is we can say we want to export this class. Okay, we want to export this class. And once we do so, this now becomes a module. And notice that there is no error at this point. Okay, this is just a module. And the way the module works is we're saying, hey, this class is something that we can import now inside of our app.js. So instead of us not having any code hinting like we've been getting, right, what we can do instead is at the top of our file, let's say, we can, again, underneath the use strict typically, we can use the import statement. So we can say import, and notice that we can actually, this is the pattern, import something from whatever the module, right? So what we want, the module that we have is /contact.js, right? Contact. And what we want to is we want to import contact from contacts. Notice how that works. Import contact from contact. So contact is the name of the file. Contact itself is the name of the class, right? That we use. And we're going to see that there in this long file now, we have quite a long file. Whenever we want to instantiate an object's, kind of contact, so we would probably want to find it. So I'm going to find in this file objects.contact. This is no longer valid. There is no objects folder anymore, but there is a contact, right? So contact, and if you notice right now, if I hover over, I'm getting code hinting again. Yay. And before I wasn't with that whole objects.contact methodology. Right? So you can see now that contact is actually of type contact. which is what I wanted in the first place, not objects.contact, which is awesome. I think this is good functionality. But what about, does it work, right? And by the way, let's take a look and see if there's any other objects dot anywhere else. And you can see that we have something commented out. Here we have something we have to use. We want to make this new. This is important to get it right. And anything else looks like just the only thing we have here is in comments, which is okay. All right, so will this work without using any kind of translation? Because normally when we want to use the latest features of ECMAScript 2015, 2016, 2017, and so on, we need to use some kind of translation or transpile kind of method. For example, Babel, and I'll talk about that. So if I want to use Babel, right, for translating, Babel JS is what it is. What it will do is it will translate. It's a JavaScript compiler that will translate from ECMAScript 20 earlier versions of, or the latest version of ECMAScript 2015, 2016, all the way to 2020 to an older version, just like we saw that TypeScript did, but without using TypeScript. We just convert something that is compatible or cross-compatible with an older version of JavaScript. And we can use something called Babel to do this. But it becomes another source of contention, because what we want to do is we want to do something like this. We want to export some kind of flow, and you can see that we can't do that. We can't usually use new features of JavaScript, especially the module pattern, without something like Babel, unless we use, like we said before, the modules type, right? So we're saying that the script type is equal to module, right? If we say that inside of the script tag, we can save ourselves a step and not use Babel at all, not use a transpiler, all right, for this thing. So again, if I go back to VS Code now, let's test it and see if these changes are effective. So again, I'm going to go to, I just want to make sure that there's no objects anymore, right? And there's only contact. The only contact we have is the contact that we get now from our import. This is what we've imported, all right? So you can see that there isn't contact. There's other contacts, as an example, but there isn't any, there's only 1 or 9 instances of where we use contact, but that's in only a couple places there, and you can see that. We can also search for new contact, right? And there's only 2 instances of that, and we've taken care of that. It's no more objects.contact. And again, if you hover over, you get context. You get like some kind of code hinting that tells us that we're good. But how does it work? Does it work? And you're going to see we have a problem. And if you inspect and take a look and see that what the console is, it says refuse to apply style blah 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 because is the MIME type, as an example, fail to load resource, and all this kind of stuff. And it says that we've got a bit of we're causing errors now. It says failed to load resource, server responded with a status of 404 for jQuery and all this kind of stuff, right? And it says app right here, this is the main culprit, uncaught syntax error, cannot use import statement outside a module. So we can't even import it without this module pattern. So let's fix it. So again, going back to our index.html, sure, we've marked this one as a module, but we also have to mark this one as a module. Type is equal to module. Save. And let's go back and to here and see what other problems we have. It says refuse to apply the style, blah, blah, blah. Let's go into localhost. Make sure that we go into localhost 3000 and we're good to go. Okay, I'm not sure why we got 3001 in the first place, but here you can see that we're good. We're good to go. We can still do everything. Let's check on sources. So to make sure that it's still our latest code. So here's our app.js. you can see that this is not correct. What the heck am I looking at here? This is not correct, my friends. Yeah, no wonder we're having a bit of a problem. This is actually going to a different. Just want to make sure that localhost is going to 3000. All right, so yeah. So why is this having an issue? So let's inspect this and go down. I thought so. Yeah, I'm using something else on another port. So it says refuse to apply style, localhost, bootstrap, and you might be having the same or similar issues, right? So localhost, node modules, blah, 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 blah. And you can see that we got lots of issues, right? min.css and all this kind of stuff. And all these 404s failed to load resource from the server with the status of 404 found not found. As an example, do you have the same problem? Hopefully you're in the same boat as me, right? Because we want to make sure we correct properly. So again, node modules, bootstrap. Remember we copied bootstrap, but we don't have any of this stuff. Well, this is what's causing our issue. So it's not what I'm thinking it is. Let's make our things. We'll say we'll do a npm install, which should take care of our issues with node modules. There was no more node modules, which caused part of our problem. Right, as an example, we're going to have to rejig or reboot this thing here. So we're going to say let's restart. Let's do light server one more time to make sure that it's working properly, and then we'll deal with the next problems. So we deal with one problem at a time. First of all, we had an issue where we had problems finding. Okay, so next one, it says failed to load resource. The server responded with the status of 404 for contact, and it said what? Contact doesn't exist, right? So that's really weird, right? That's really weird. Because take a look at that. So the application itself, it says from a source perspective, right? It says localhost scripts contact doesn't compute. Well, yeah, of course, because what we've done is when we import, we have to be very specific and very careful when we import that what we're importing from, it depends on how we do it. At the top here, we're saying import from contact. Let's just put contact.js. Seriously. And let's see if it finds it there, if that's good enough, or if we have to actually put it. There we go. So that's all it was. It was just we had to tell it specifically where to look. Scripts contact. I could have done, normally we don't have to put the JS in there, but it's okay. Right, so that was the issue. So now you can see everything's running again. So why is this a good pattern? Why is this import contact from contact? Why is this a great pattern? Well, we're going to see this next semester when you guys do COMP125, which is the advanced web development course I'm working on this semester. I've already got half of it done. You're going to see that we're going to see this pattern more often, especially when it comes to Angular, right? So we're going to say, hey, get the contact class and do this, right? So the way this works is anything we want to export is exposed. Only the stuff we export is exposed. The stuff that's in here, we can have a private construct in here. For example, let's say I have another class, right? Let me show you this. So let's say, for example, instead of contact, I have a different kind of contact, like a business contact or something, right? So here's my class. I can have something called, another class called business contact, right? Maybe I have a business number for the business contact, which extends the contact class as an example, right? I might have a constructor function that takes in, a couple things, just like we have here in terms of first name, last name. The constructor will take all this, plus some kind of, my business contact will also have a business contact number, let's just say. Okay, I'm just making this up here as we go. So you can see that, sorry, let me just grab these things here, because I want to satisfy my super constructor, right? So I have all this, and maybe I have some kind of business contact number. business. We'll say business number. How about that? A business number that we also take in. But what we need to do is whenever we create a constructor, we need to satisfy the super constructor, and we need to pass in first name, last name, email address, as well as contact number. We don't care about the business contact number, but we need to satisfy the super constructor's requirements to do this. Okay, so I'm not going to go further than this. Yes, we could probably create a, I think actually short message is probably something we have to do too. Yeah. So business number, you know, this business number here, we could have some kind of business number. We can create a business number object just like we do here. This dot business number is equal to business number is what I would do, right? Let's just complete it. The constructor, this dot business number is equal to business number. So that kind of takes the business number parameter and passes into the business number property. Right, that's what it does. And you know, just like we have a set contact, we can do a set business contact. We can also do other things. ToString, we can extend the ToString function. Servers do that. So we can also print out the business contact number, the business number. So ToString, we print this, and you know what? Let's print out the business just to have something that's different. The rest is the same. Call it business number. And let's adjust everything so it all fits. So it's actually going to make our ToString option a little bit different. Okay, there we go. And hell, we could probably do the same thing with some of the other things. I'll just take the toJSON. I'll override all these things. So I'll override toJSON as well as whenever we write them again. One thing to note is that when I write toJSON again, because I'm overriding the previous one, it just adds more stuff. So JSON object, I'm also going to equal to the business number. So we're going to say business number. If we had such a thing, this dot business number. And we're going to return, and the same thing goes when it's incoming. We'd have a special kind of contact. And we can say that this dot business number is equal to JSON data dot business number. So we can see that we can get the same thing. I'm just updating it for this business contact, different kind of contact. But because I haven't used the export keyword, right? And if I want to go to my app.js and use it, only contact is available, right? If I somehow, in my wisdom, wanted to jump to the start function somehow, right? So let's say I want to jump to start, which is way down here. And I said, you know, I feel like using a business contact too. Let's just do it. And I said, you know, let business contact as equal to a new business contact. And if we did this, just this alone, and if I hovered over, it'd be like, wah, don't know what you're talking about. We have no idea what a business contact is, right? Especially business contact with a big B, right? No idea. And if I was going to print out what this is, if I said something like console log business contact, just to print this out, you can see that when we're running in our file, and if I go to my inspect, you can see that on the console, I'm going to get this thing that says business contact is not defined. But we did. It was in the same file, right? You're going to argue. It's in the same file that we have here in our contact.js. Look, we defined it here, and we defined, you know, contact here. We did, but we need to export it. We need to do one of these. Export. Furthermore, it's not just about this. Export, business contact. But we also have to import it, because at the same time, even if we go back, it says business context not defined. Why? Because we've exported it, but in my app.js, there's no place where I said, hey, import this. So what I can do is I can use the comma for this, comma, and then business contact, and it finds it. We can also do, instead if I want to find everything, I can find star, right? Now, be careful about this. We wouldn't put it in curly braces. We would just say import star from, right? This kind of stuff. And typically, it doesn't like it. it prefers this syntax, where we kind of use a comma separated syntax to include any files or any kind of classes that you want. We'll look at the import syntax in a second for ECMAScript 2015, 2016, and beyond. But if I go back down, if I scroll back down to start now, and if I have our business contact, again, we have good context, right? So this is good. And this is what we want, okay? It's awesome because we get code hinting, which is the main thing. We want code hinting, guys, right? And if I go back to this, you can see now I've got a business contact. It's empty, but I've got a business contact that I've been able to create. All right. So that's kind of how the new module pattern works with ECMAScript 2015, 2016, and so on. Let's just take a look at some of the documentation online. You'll know more about that. You'll learn more about that up in the next semester. But let us explore that just a little bit further. So if I said, you know, module pattern for JavaScript, ECMAScript 6 and beyond, then, and I'm just randomly choosing a spot here as an example, importing and exporting it talks about the module pattern, export. You can actually export other things than just, this is kind of small. You can actually export other things other than just classes. You can export functions. You can export variables, whatever you want, and then you can import whatever you want. Exactly kind of how we did it. All right, this kind of pattern that we used. So named exports. It also allows us to have default exports. We can also use something called, so we can have private functions. These are like private functions here and private variables, right? Square root is a private variable. But then we can also use this module exports pattern. Module export says, okay, for the whole module, make a new object that exports square root, square, and diag, right? And then what we would do is we can use the require pattern. All right, so that's kind of another way of doing it. We also have something, we can also use something called default. So the default function or class, right? Export default, which basically says that when I import a module, I just have to say import my function from myfunc, and whatever myfunc.js gives me is going to be the import function, right? So very straightforward. You can also use this pattern, my class, and so on. They're not that difficult, but I just wanted to point this out, that the export import structure is something that you're going to probably see around, and I wanted to explain it to you before we get moving. Again, you can see that here we're specifying a module type, and one of the things they say is support for cyclic dependencies. What if I want one thing dependent on another thing that depends on another thing? That would be a problem. And what about I have to list everything again. You know, that's one thing I have to do. I have to list everything as before. It's not like I can just sit there and import everything like we did before. And one of the challenges that I have with this structure, right, like we talked about before, so if I go back to here, big problem that I have is that, you know, your contact.js can be very long, right? Very, very long. It's not one file, one class, or one file, one function. It could be many functions and stuff inside of a file, and which is okay if it's not too big. Like this is not a big long file. It's only a couple of classes. But I still like separating my classes per file, which means I'm going to have a lot of import statements at the top here. That's what it means, right? If I wanted to separate this up, I would have an import contact from contact.js, import business contact from businesscontact.js, import blah, 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 and there'd be like multiple lines of imports at the top of my file. So good, yes, bad also, right? But the great thing about this is it allows the eventually the compilers or transpilers to understand later on what order you want to import things and what dependencies do you have. For example, right now we have contact.js as a dependency, right? You know, for app.js to function. App.js won't function without contact.js, right? And this import statement actually, it creates a dependency, right, for that to happen. Okay, so that's something that I want to show you as well. How does this translate if I was going to use something like the same kind of structure in TypeScript? So again, remember we talked about TypeScript. We're going to learn more about TypeScript as we go forward. I randomly chose the module pattern here but let's go to typescriptlang.org, which has updated its structure. TypeScript 4 beta is now available. Yay! Right. So if I go to the playground, here's my playground for TypeScript, right, as an example. And if I copy paste some of the stuff that I have, let's just do this. So I'm going to go into here and let's just grab my contact.js and grab all of it and kind of do one of these. All right, so there it is. And I have to specify, remember how we do this? From a configuration perspective, we say what the target is. So if my target is ECMAScript 2020, as an example, then it's going to start giving me some, remember, it's trying to construct the stuff on the right-hand side due to this, right? If I wanted to convert this back to ECMAScript 5, right, well, then you can see it's going to start making some changes. It's going to create and extends functionality and so on. And remember, it's going to try and create old-style prototypal classes and convert our new classes into old-style classes. All right. I'm just pointing this out because one of the challenges that TypeScript will give you is something like this. You can also test it in something like Babel REPL, right? So if you go to Babel, right, Babel REPL, right, and if I go to Babel, there is a try it out area, right, where I can put in a piece of code on the left, and what it'll do is it'll put a piece of code on the right. So Babel is another great place, babeljs.io, because there is a way of translating between new style JavaScript to old style JavaScript, right, without using TypeScript, right? So you can see what it does. It says object defined property exports because it wants to be ultra compatible. You can see what level of compatibility. If I said ECMAScript 2015, well then, and if I took away stage 2 in React, let's say, or if I want to say ECMAScript 2016, 2017, supporting all these different things, right? So 2017 and beyond, well, there's not many changes. Still, they talk about object-defined property exports as an ES module, right? Because like I said to you, it's not standard that I can use the export pattern. Notice down here, it's exports.businessContact is equal to businessContact, right? Just like exports.contact is equal to contact, right? So yes, you could do it this way. So we're business contacts, and you can set up, we initialize them first, and it's very similar to the IFI pattern that we had before. Okay. I'm just pointing this out because you might try it and you might say, whoa, it's not working for me. And the reason why it's not working is I'm using old style JavaScript or new style JavaScript in an old style browser, and it's not working. Again, example, this is the presets. These are the presets, right? And we can specify if we want to prettify it. We can specify what the source module, the type is, module source type. We can also specify which target. This is the preset that we want to use. So if I said something like, well, ECMAScript 2015, well, now we're talking, right? Because now, it's got less support, so what they do is they create a whole other kind of structure, okay? For using Babel REPL, that's what this is, okay? So it's there. You can definitely test it in the old style way of doing things. This works for us. It's not a bad thing, but like I said, my issue with it is that I have 2 classes inside of a file, and it doesn't make me happy to do it this way. If I only had one, let me just take this whole class away again, and then I'll save it up on GitHub for you. But if I only had one, this makes me happy, right? Now this would break what we just did in app.js, because in app.js you need the other one, right? It doesn't understand what I'm trying to do here, although JavaScript doesn't complain much about this, right? Which is a problem for me. That's why I like TypeScript, because TypeScript, it complains. It says, wait, Tom, there is no business contact you're trying to download. What are you trying to do here? What if I just did, instead of import contact like this in curly braces, if I just try like the old way, import contact? That also works, right? So you can see that import contact, and if I was to find new contact, and if I hover over, again, you can see contact, but the problem with that is I lose my context. It'll work, this will work, but using the new curly brace kind of structure, when I do contact, it actually takes my, oh, God. It gives me context, right? Like when I hover over this, it gives me a class. This is good. This is how it should be. So yes, could I do it the other way, the older way? Yes, I could. Do I want it to do it the older way? No, I don't, right? And one thing to note also is what happens in the browser. So we've checked to see what it's like normally, and let me just refresh here. Business context not defined? Where? I thought I saved. Let me just go back and make sure I have no errors, guys. I don't want any errors. No, I did not. At least give me some kind of error notification. Okay, cool. So so that's great. It did this, right? This structure. But can I make a new business contact? Can I say something like, or can I make a new contact? I can say let Tom equal to a new contact. Can I do that? Right? Well, it'll allow me to, and it says no. I don't know what a contact is, right? Because so the thing that I wanted to avoid, which is having stuff inside the global namespace, I've avoided it, right? Because you can't go and make a new contact or even access the contact class from anywhere. You have to import it. You have to go through this, structure where I want to import contact, as an example, from where we are, which is /scripts/contact.js, right? And this won't work either because it says you can't use the import statement outside of a module, right? So again, this is good. It protects us, right? Unless I want to write some script, I'm not going to be able to access the contact class. So anything on the command line, which I'm always unhappy about allowing, is good. It protects me, but even more so than using objects.contact. On the command line, I could have done objects.contact before. Here I can't, because this command line isn't a module, right? Could I do it, in a script? Absolutely. Can I do it in the command line? No. That's good, and that's how I see it. All right, let me push this up to GitHub now, because I think we've gone and done what I wanted to do, which was, hey, let's make sure that we're still good. Let's change our module pattern to this ECMAScript 6 module pattern with an export, right? Again, all I needed to do was say export in the class. I didn't have to wrap this thing in an IFI. So from that perspective, okay, positives, it's a little cleaner. Negatives, I could put more than one class or function per file, which makes me, but then you could do that with the other module pattern too. But if I want to use the same structure, let's say, then making a namespace, it would be more challenging, right? That's why still TypeScript is being used, for example, in Angular and in other places, because TypeScript gives you this namespace capability that ECMAScript 2015, 2016, all the new ECMAScript stuff doesn't give you. All right, so that's something that we have to note. But let's put this up as a change, so you can see the pattern is different than what it was. So again, I'm going to go to my PowerShell. I'm going to clear. I'm going to git add dot. You can see here I've added everything else in. Git commit -m, and I'm going to say converted contact.js to ES6 plus module pattern. It's probably too long of a statement, but that's okay. Git push origin master. Okay, cool. So this works locally. This works locally. But how does this work remotely? Does it work if I push this to Centennial? So let's try this again. Remember, Centennial is my overall arcing file, right? So if I say git push into Centennial College master branch, right? I can do that too. Centennial College, remember, is my entire account. So my default account project now is this project that I'm using, right? So if I go back to, and what am I getting? Oh, I'm not getting an error. If I go up to here, as an example, we know what we need to check. We need to go to Centennial College. You can see that I have Centennial College at github.io, which is my default kind of place to check, and I can go into check for the how I've published everything. Here's my page, which gives me this. Looks like we're okay, but let's check to see if I go and inspect and go to sources, and if I look at scripts, what does my contact.js look like? It looks like I got the export happening. And what about my app.js? It looks like I have the import happening, and we're fully supported online. So this is pretty good, right? So you can see we got support online. We do have, it shows one error, right? And it says failed to load a resource favicon, because I don't have a favicon loaded, and that's just because of the way I'm loading stuff. Okay, favicons are kind of required in many ways. Okay, so hopefully that clarifies about ES6 module pattern. I did have some emails that came my way and said, so why would I use, as an example, the namespace that you showed us, namespace pattern with a whole iffy, it's pretty ugly, when we have this other ECMAScript 6 module pattern. Well, there's advantages and disadvantages, guys, is what I can tell you between one and the other. And I think I still like my way of doing it, which is with the module pattern that I get from TypeScript, that whole idea, which is, I think, is a little bit more, I have more control, right, than I do with this way. And I can also add more modules to it, right, where here I can't. I'm limited within this implementation of the module pattern. Okay, in this implementation. Now, there's nothing that would stop me. And I'll stop talking about this in a sec. But there's nothing that would stop me from not putting multiple classes and other objects here in one file. And some people also like that way, because it organizes them, or you, in one large file, all related classes, all related functions, and enumerations all in one big file. And you can always go through there and search, and you don't have to search through multiple files and so on. So some people like that from a simplicity perspective. But I think from a management perspective, if you look at management, and maintainability, if I was going to give this out to multiple people, I think it still might be better if you had separate files. Again, it's up to you from a developer perspective, and from your programming house, wherever you work, they might specify a different way of doing things in the way I've indicated here, because they have a way that works for them, right? As an example. All right, so that is this part. I wanted to kind of bring to light that module pattern, which we'll just continue using today, and we'll see how it goes. But today's topic is something totally different. Today's topic is managing state and information security. We're going to start talking about it today, and we should finish by Wednesday. Okay. So really, there are several security issues that we can talk about with JavaScript, and what we want to do is we want to save our information. Let's say, for example, I want to save for the fact that I'm logged in, right? I want to save it somewhere, or I want to save my preferences. So when I come back to a particular website, it recognizes my information when I log in, and it saves things like my username, my password, my bunch of stuff that it has, so I don't have to remember it. We can do this with a bunch of different ways. right? One thing is our query string. First thing you're going to notice our string for our, this is kind of a weird way of looking at it, but let me just make this so that you can see it better. Typically what you have is a long URL, all right? And the URL is something like this. I'll just undo that change. Typically what you have is you have this long URL, right, as an example, and what you have is an href tag, and the href tag has add item.html and then this question mark. And the question mark has some information, right, and then it has an equal sign, and then it has some values like this, and then it has an ampersand sign, and then it has another thing and some other values. What the heck is this that we see all the time in our code? What does this mean, and what is it? Well, the question mark really, it creates this idea of name value pairs, right? So that's the first thing we have to see. Whenever we see a link like this, it means that anything that's after the question mark is a variable, and the variable has value. This is the value of the variable. All right, so this is what happens here. Whenever we want to send information to a particular website, we can specify it after the question mark, right? The ampersand says, hey, by the way, I have an additional value, additional variable. It's called quantity. So there's two variables here, ISBN and quantity. That's what, if you want to parse this string. And the values are this long ISBN number, as well as a quantity of what I'm looking for from a particular thing I want to add to my cart, as an example. I want to add this book. It looks like a book. An ISBN is usually a book number. And I want two of these books to be added to my, added maybe to my cart or something. Order book. I want to order 2 of those kind of books. So that's how it works. That's the query string. But the problem with having a query string that's out like this is that, well, we have access to all kinds of information, right? So once we see it, we actually physically see it inside of our URL, and you can see what this is, right? We have this, and also we know another thing. We know that add item.html, right? We are able to, use this add item.html. What it does is, when we see this up on the top here, it means that we want to process a request to add in to quantity or whatever it is, maybe to a cart or something else. That's what it does. Okay. So I want to be able to parse this string when it's incoming. If I want to go to this and enter some data, so let's say, for example, in my example, I go to home and I say, now this is going to be messed up, but I say something like, I want to enter, some variable, right? And I want to say that variable is equal to some data like 3, right? Well, crazy thing that happened is, remember, whenever we go to our home in our single page application, I've kind of taken care of that problem, right? But actually created a new problem. Because if I go to my URL and it doesn't understand what I'm trying to give it, right? I'm trying to go, let's say, to products, and let's say I want to see, I want to add, a new contact for in my products. I can't just say products, kind of like, I want to add, or maybe I want to go products/add. They would have to have another. I would have to have another link, an add link, right? Products add, and then what am I adding? Right, something like a new contact, right, where my first name is equal to something, right? Let's say Robert, and separated by an ampersand, and my last name, and so on. Like I would have to send this information on the URL, and what you can do is, when we receive some information on the URL like this, we could use this information to break it down and to separate it into a request. That's what this is. The first part is, how do I get our query from our our search? We can look at the object at the top, and if I was to put this right now anywhere, right, inside of our file, we were going to get some kind of, the search itself is what we've got up there, you know, inside of our URL. So if I was to say let query data, let's go and do that. So go into app.js, and after we initialize our site, we want to have our query data equal to location search, and I want to console log that. What is it? And if I go back out to, am I still running? I am. So what do I see? If I go here and inspect and I go to console, I got nothing, right? Because if I go to app.js number 416, right? Here's 416. Query data, my location.search up here is like nothing. And even if I was to put something in there, like I would say something like question mark, you know, name is equal to Tom, and go in there, well, it gets rid of it because the way we set up our structure. The difference is it gets rid of it from here, but here it's preserved. Take a look at that, right? What's happened? Name is equal to Tom in question marks. If I was to do that again, let's say, okay, so question mark, name is equal to Tom, right? Then you can see name here is equal to Tom here, right? So I can put whatever I want in the query. So again, question mark, name is equal to Tom, and number is equal to 15, right? And you can see that it comes down in here. Look, it comes down into my query. So my query actually receives it. Because we're doing a single page application, I really don't reset, but it looks like I do, right? Because I've taken care of that issue. Because what's happening is if it doesn't understand something, it takes me back by default to the my primary web page, my index.html. I only have one web page, right? Which is a great thing for me. And there's advantages to this because I can sanitize my query string, right? But disadvantage-wise, I won't see it on my URL. If I want to, or I want to, I've talked about this, I want to bookmark something, I can't bookmark anything with my single page application structure that I have going on right now. So one thing is, if I want to remove the opening question mark, that's the first thing. And they talk about how to sanitize it by getting a substring. A substring, what it does, it creates a new string. Remember we talked about that? We want to go from this position to the query data length. So we take the entire thing, and it talks about how to do this in steps. Then we can split the query data with the ampersand sign. When we see the ampersand, it splits it into a query array of 2 strings. And then from there, what we want to do is we want to separate it. Why is this good? Why are we even talking about this? Because this is one way of sending data to our website. We can send data by inputting information, and into this location.search, which is the URL, we can get information from there when someone types something in. Okay, so that's one thing we can do. We can query data. We can split up that string. One thing that we're getting is some extra. We're getting additional. When I go back to my file, let me just go back to this. We're getting some additional characters like %22, %22. Those %22s are my question marks, right? If I'm entering data, like so. Okay. But number, you can see the number, clearly number is a value, right? So we have this key value pair stuff happening. All right. So one thing they talk about here, another way of saving state is if I have a hidden form field somewhere inside of my my file, I can store data temporarily there. No one can see it, but it's stored physically on my page. So I can use my page as a storage medium if I want to store information about, you, as an example. I can have a hidden form field. As long as I use type is equal to hidden, then that form field will never show up. And if it doesn't show up, I can store data in there. So that's one way I can do it as well. Okay. So ways of storing and transferring and relating data. That's what we're talking about here, right? Now I can tell this is old because I'm seeing HTML, right? We don't talk HTML as much anymore, but sure, if you're programming in a .NET environment. So again, user completes the order. Here's a kind of a full structure. User submits the order. Field values are encoded in the query string, like we just talked about, and then we copy the field values on the next page, right, inside of a hidden file. And when the user submits the order, we look at that hidden file and take that information from the hidden field values and we push it along the path all the way towards our server. So whether it's a PHP server on the back end, Node.js server, a Django server, Java server, something on the back end that takes it and processes the data that we're sending to us. So that's definitely another way of doing it with hidden form field. Is it popular? It's used. Is it as popular as using cookies? No. Cookies is actually another way of saving some data, right? So it's actually a container. I want you to think of a cookie as an object. That's what it is. And I can save small pieces of information, right? It's stored by the web server. It's also stored on the user's computer, right? So that's something that is being done. So for example, when I go to a website with my browser, then I have information stored in cookies inside of my web browser. Now those cookies have an expiration date. Cookies are, think about them as containers for small data, a small amount of data. And I take that information and I can kind of tell if you have been here before, if you've logged in or logged out, and that kind of stuff. Okay. So we can use the state inside of cookies. We can also use web storage. That's another medium we use to store stuff. So again, there's like three things we're talking about here. So we can use query strings, and we can use hidden form fields to temporarily maintain state. We can also do storing state on a computer somewhere, and usually it's in a browser with cookies or something called web storage. So those are the two things we can do. There's two types of cookies. There's temporary cookies that only remain for the current browser session. So when you close down the browser, it disappears. And there's persistent cookies that have a lifetime. So they last for a week. They last for a day. They last for an hour, or whatever, however long you want them to last. Persistent cookies that stay in your in memory. Okay. So some limitations: we can't store more than 20 cookies, right, from a server or a domain. So you can't have more than that for each server or domain. Total cookies per browser can't exceed 300. That's pretty much the standard right now too. Still, right? And the largest cookie size is 4K. That's 4,000 bytes. That's pretty large still. Lots of information can be stored with 4,000 bytes for each cookie. And like it says, not enforced by all browsers. So sometimes some browsers will allow you to do whatever you want. Okay. Like if we were to query, maximum number of cookies for Chrome. So if let's look that up. So maximum number of cookies for Chrome. Okay. So it says, so you can see that this has changed, right? So Chrome 5 to 7, 70 cookies. Chrome 8 to 58, 180 cookies with 4K capability per cookie. That's what it's saying. So this is actually, the stuff I'm showing you is a little older, right, from the book. All right, so that's kind of where we're at. And let's say, what's the maximum number of cookies for Firefox, right? Then you can see Firefox 21 to 52 is 150 cookies at approximately 4K, right, and so on. IE6 we don't even want to look at. You can see that they don't have very big capabilities for this. But look at what we're saying. We're saying total cookies per browser can't exceed 300, right? But depending on the browser, it's less, right? All right, so that is some limitations around cookies. They're containers, so we don't know what they are yet. We haven't seen them, but they're containers, okay? We can store stuff, right? As an example, like this, document.cookie, right? We can say is a name, and the name itself plus equals some kind of value. We have this idea of a name value pair that we create inside storage. And if you want to see all your cookies right now for a particular site, right? So let's take a look at some additional things that we have here. So we have sources. We've talked about sources before. We have elements. Elements look at the page elements. These are all the page elements. Console is console. Sources is our code, right? Network, it talks about, you know, the communication that we've been doing on the network, different kind of for each of our files and so on. Performance, we can start and stop our performance counter, right? Memory, right? We can take a look at memory and kind of do a you know, kind of get a reading on how much memory we're using. Especially, it's very important to do this when you're using a larger web application. Then there's application, and this is where we want to just hover for a second. Application, all right? So if I go to, on the left, this is inside the browser. If I go to local storage for localhost 3000, you can see that key value pairs, I got none, right? Session storage for localhost 3000, key value pairs, I got none. So there's local storage and session storage. We also can look at cookies. So under cookies for localhost 3000, we have a couple of cookies. One of them is called IO right now, and it expires. It's a session expiration. Size is 22 kilobytes, right? Medium priority, and it goes with the slash path. There's also something called connect SID. I'll guarantee you these two things right here is because of my light server. That's what's actually creating these cookies, right? Light server is making these name value pairs. That's what this is, okay? So that's what it is. Also notice that there's something called Web SQL. You can create your own web SQL kind of database, as well as an index DB, right, which you can also create. Okay, I'm not going to do that here, but you can definitely use IndexedDB and Web SQL to kind of make something that's almost like a database that physically lives in the browser. Okay, not as popular these days, and not all that secure either. All right, so that is the way you make documents, document.cookie, the name, and so on. And it talks about several different kinds of parameters that you can use. So you can modify cookies. If I start off, I can specify the domain. So I might have multiple subdomains. I may want to specify a subdomain. The name is the name of the cookie. The path, on the path, the web server in which documents must be located to have access to the cookie. By default, the cookie is available to all web pages in the same directory. So you can only make it available to some places, but not others. If it's secure or not, and whether the cookie can be transmitted only over a secure protocol, such as HTTPS. Remember, HTTPS, for use secure version of HTTP protocol, you need to have engaged TLS/SSL, that's what it is, with some kind of TLS/SSL certificate, right, which is a secure certificate. Notice here, localhost, we are not secure, right, as an example. That's what this means, we're not secure. But if I go to a more popular website, let's say, for example, like Google, if I could actually type in Google, you get this little thing here, which is like a little lock that tells you that your connection is secure. And it also shows you the certificate. This is a site certificate. Who issued it? GTSCA 101, right? You can actually look at the certificate for the security, okay, if you really want to, and if it's up to date or not. You can also see how many cookies are in use and which ones they are. So the following cookies were set when you view this page. Google.ca. Here are the cookies, right, as an example. So I can look at, for example, SID. What's the content? What's the domain specifically? What's the path you can go to get there? Send for what kind of kind of creation, when it was set, so July 18th, when it expired, July 18th, so it already expired. Saturday, July 10th. I'm not sure how Saturday and Sunday make any sense, but it expired, right, and so on. Okay, so that's cookies. There's also anything that was blocked, if you have any cookies that were blocked. But you can see that there's google.ca. And let's take a look at another one. Let's go to Centennial College. So if I go to Centennial College, not github.io, let's go to centennialcollege.ca, right? So here is Centennial College. There's a little lock, right? And if I click on the little lock there, we can look at cookies and see what they're looking for. So centennialcollege.ca, we can look at cookies. We have an IDMS, so a S session ID, that's what that is. We have, this is the content for that. It's fully available for you to look at. When it was created, right, Wednesday, July 22nd. And when it does expire, when the browser session ends. When I close the browser down, it will end. I can also remove it if I want to remove the cookie manually. Okay, so that's what that does. That's centennialcollege.ca. There's also www.centennialcollege.ca, where I have additional cookies, right? I have additional cookies here. So I have an alert, and I also have some local storage that was created, right? So I can take a look at that, and some session storage, and I can take a look at that. Okay, so these are all things that that when we go to a particular website, we have cookies that are created. So here we're in our website, or localhost 3001 in this case. 3001 is because I'm using something. My system is actually using something else right now. I'm running something else. We don't have any cookies that are currently stored other than the ones that are being used by my Light server. These ones are from Light server. And when do they expire? When the session expires. When I close this down, so do they. They expire too. Okay, so that's how you see cookies. That's where cookies are, as an example. But one of the most important thing is the name parameter. And it says this is the one parameter that is required. Okay, so let's make a cookie then, if that's true. If I go to my app.js, and let's get rid of this for a second. And we'll say like let new cookie equal to document.cookie, right? And remember that document.cookie, when I go here, this is a property. Let's not do this. Let's just do document.cookie is equal to, and remember what we have, how we configure it. If we're going to go back to this, right? We can say that we have key value pairs, username, member, audio, right? So document.cookie, right? And we can have all these things, these different kinds of structures, right? So let's take a look at that. So say if I go to username is equal to I will say Tom. How about that? Username is equal to Tom. And this is stored when, after I'm done initializing my site, I store a cookie that says username is equal to Tom, right? And if I go to my browser now, then you can see that username is there and my value is Tom. This is inside. Again, to find this information, you go to your browser, you inspect site, you go through on the right this application, and you can see any of the cookies that are here, right? Notice that it says expired session and the size is 11 bytes. That's how big it is. Okay, so I mean, it's literally, I can create a cookie in 2 seconds by giving it this way, right? If I comment it out, does it still live? Right? Well, yeah, it does, until I shut down my machine, right? Or shut down this browser. So let's say, for example, I exit the browser and go back. So if I go back to localhost 3001, and if I go to inspect, and if I go to application, right, it's right here still, right? Tom. That's the value. If I click on any one of these things, you get the full value in here. But see, Tom is there still. It's persisting, right? Because why? I haven't shut down the entire browser, right? The browser, even though I killed the tab, the browser is still there, right? I can manually delete it. I can go up here and right click and I can go delete, and it'll just get rid of that cookie, right? And if I refresh, it's gone, right? But I can always put it back, right? So I can go put it back by my service. There it is. My username is Tom, right? So one thing is we can encode, we can read the cookie or write the cookie out here. That's part of it. What writing the cookie out here is actually placing the cookie in memory, right? But I want to be able to use this information, right? As an example, I want to be able to use this information later on. Cool. So these are the cookie properties. In this case, when I make different cookie properties, I do this. That's all it is. One thing I haven't specified, I've specified the name automatically, right? The name is something that I've done. So let's say, for example, if I say something like document.cookie and I say that that is equal to temp. Then when I go back to my browser, right, I have my value is temp, my name is nothing, right? So my value gets set, my name happened to be nothing, right? And what if I specifically did, you know, there's other ways of configuring my cookie. For example, cookie itself has a bunch of other things, italics, normalize, because it's a string, right? So I can specify whatever I want. I can actually format the cookie inside of a string first and then attach it to my document, just like this. Okay, document.cookie, and then attach the string to whatever I want in there. So I want to be able to format it. Okay. It tells you that there's certain things cookies can't include. For example, I can't include semicolons or other special characters, right? Because it'll be misinterpreted. And what I want to do is I want to encode. The character, special characters, as a string, and you can do that with escape characters, right? But what I can also do is I can use this something called an encode URI component function that's built in. So the example would be I want to encode my URI component text, and then I can decode my URI component text when I want to read it. Okay, that's how it goes. All right, so let me give you some examples here. I want to encode a cookie called username. Right here it is. Plus, I want to encode the URI component username. This is a safe thing to do because what this does, it ensures that when I put together the rest of this thing, it also I can specify expires when does it expire, and I can say expires date to UTC string whatever it is. Okay, so if I tried this, if I said that, okay, username Tom, that's the first thing, and then if I want to say that my string, so let's say for example let username is equal to Tom, right? And I want to say, well, username is equal to, again, if I start typing in username is equal to plus encode URI component, right? Encode URI component, like it says here, to my username, right? Here is where I'm encoding it. Plus, I want to add in expires. Let's just type in what it says here, right? Equals to. So I'm telling them, configuring my cookie, right? Plus my expires date. Okay, expires date is a new date, so we haven't done that yet. So let's say that expires date is equal to a new date option, a new date component. That's what it is, right? Expires date. Then I can say that expires date to UTC string plus expires date to UTC string, and that creates my cookie, right? That's my cookie itself. So if I kind of say save, and I go back out to the browser, then I see username, and it says Tom expires Monday, 27th of July at 1950, right? So it's going to expire later on today, okay? GMT, actually it's right now when it expires. So that's interesting. So it kind of took Tom and encoded it, but it also added some additional information. Here it is. So this is good. This is ability for us to encode the information, right? So I want to create a cookie. I want to specify a path that it's available for. This is a path specifically in my website, or if I want to specify the path is only for the main kind of site slash. So if I was going to configure this like this, so encode URI component username plus path, right? That's okay, right? Let me just go back here. I think, did I make this, did I do that right? Yeah, I did. Just want to make sure that this is different than what we did before. So we go to here. If I said my username is this plus, just like it says here in my code, my plus my path is equal to slash plus path is equal to slash, right? Then I get this. So it says Tom path, right? And the %3, %2, what that is basically saying is that specifically works on a particular path. There's the path, right? If I was to say path is equal to contact, then, you know, that did not work, my friends. Path, username, I think it's wrong actually. That's why I was like questioning it. I was like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Let me just make sure that this is correctamundo. And I need to put a space in there. Slash contact. Yeah, we have to encode that component as well because of the slash, any kind of things in there. I wonder if I can just do that like this. Encode URI components. No, I meant to do this. No, I did it the same way. Just want to make sure it's right because this doesn't show it being correct. Let me just check online. I think the documentation is slightly off. So cookies, not cookies, cookies, JavaScript cookies. I like now I got hungry. When I saw that, I was like, wait, that is terribly hungry. All right, yeah. So we did this right. We talked about expires, and they separated with a semicolon here. That's why they put the semicolon in place. Okay, so the semicolons didn't translate. They're missing for they are missing in my code. So that's what's missing here. So it's like you need to put a semicolon in there for the next thing. Username and then semicolon and then expires and so on. So I think what I need to do is there has to be a semicolon in here. Let me just get rid of this for a second because I knew something was wrong. I was like, wait, something is not right in the world. And let's see what happens here with this. Oh, it did not like that at all. Yeah, it didn't give me an error. Let me just take a look and see that. No, it didn't give me an error, but it just killed the entire thing when we did this expiry date because of this expiring. And if I was to say path, just curious. Oh, because this is now, right? So if I wanted to make some kind of future date, let's say tomorrow, right? Then that's why it's expired. It doesn't show anything right now. So if I just take this out, then it should totally work, right? Yep. But because this worked now, UTC toString expires date, which is now. That's really, I'm making the date time now, right? And there's other options. So let's just say value string number. So let's say if I say, okay, this is good. So year, month, date. So some kind of number. So the year would be something like 2020. The month was 06 because we're counting from 0. The date number starts at, we'll say whatever day is today. So 27, let's say 28 for tomorrow. And then we don't care about, those are all optionals. So let's look and see what that gives us here. Yeah, so there you go. So it says, here it is, Tom, and expires session. Okay. But that worked. That didn't get rid of me, right? Because my session was valid by 2020 06/28. 06/28 being tomorrow, right? 06 is the month because to July is this 6th. 0 would be January, right? All right, so that kind of worked. Sorry, I just want to make sure that my documentation, because I was like, wait, that doesn't seem right. If I remember about cookies, they're missing a semicolon here. So then, if that's true, what we need to do is put this semicolon in the path as an example as well. So URI encode, right? And if I would say that plus semicolon path is equal to slash, and then we're putting in the encode URI component because it'll strip some of these things that we have. Let's say views, and so make sure that that is correct. I think we have to enclose this inside of our isn't that interesting? UI component. I'm getting this error. It says expected a comma. Path expires. Slash view. And that doesn't work. And let's just try what it says to do. If I did one of these, I don't think it likes the oh yeah, I understand. It's silly. What a silly mistake that is. So yeah. So okay. So we have this username, and then we have path is equal to plus the username, right? But we need to separate the path from the username. And what you can do is you can use inner quotes and outer quotes like so. And I think that would be something we want to enclose like so, because then the semicolon would be there. I think this might work. Let's see. Yeah, well that worked, but one thing I'm not seeing is the proper path. It still didn't kind of do what I wanted it to do. All right, let's see what we see online. This is where, you know, documentation. I want to make sure I give you the right documentation, guys. I don't want you guys to, you know, to be freaked out when you try something like this. If I get you to save something in here. So this is the format, right? We have a path. We can say everything's separated by semicolons as an example. So path, specific path. We can delete a cookie, you know, as an example. We can set a cookie. Now this is what we want to do. We want to be able to get a cookie, and this is where I was going to go there. So we want to look at a cookie, but the problem is that our get cookie example that's in here on up on W3 Schools, what it does, and this makes sense, is document cookie itself. We use decode URI for each cookie that we pass in here, right? That's what it does. It depends on the if you want to specify. So if I say check a cookie, right? We have to check to see if a cookie's set. We can check to do that by, we want to look at get cookie of a particular type. So let's say, for example, I want to say, let me get that information. So I want to get that cookie by username. So if I say something like, okay, let's print out the cookie. So we're going to say console log get cookie. And get cookie, what it does, it's online here. It's using the get cookie function that these guys made. Here's the get cookie function. And what the get cookie function is, takes that CNAME. It says, okay, so we want to get that CNAME in here, and we want to decode the URI. So decoded cookie is, we're going to decode the URI, the document.cookie, and we're going to search for every object inside of here. That's what it's doing, this little function here. And it's going to, so let me just get this function here. Let's copy it from our friends, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Because you can't use get cookie unless you have it built in. It's a function that doesn't exist. So if I said console log get cookie, and then the CNAME would be username, and again, just like it shows here up online, my CNAME is username, right? So username. But because let me explain how this works in a second and what's happening. And if I go here and take a look at console, it says octoliterals are not allowed in the strict mode. Oh yeah. See, it doesn't like this, that's for sure. 0628 doesn't like me. What I put in there, which is this part, expires. We'll just take that off for now and let us get rid of all this. And that should be okay. Let's go to console. And you can see that the username is Tom, right? Because that's what I'm getting. If I go to application and if I go to username, I still get my path, but path is not really configured properly. Let's go back to this. So let's configure it separately. So if I said something like username plus, and we want to do one of these, path is equal to, right? And we want to put definitely a semicolon in here to separate my path. Path is equal to single quotes path. And I don't need my bracket, so I'm curious how that would work. Yeah, that still works okay. Although I'm not getting that path. But that's how it would work. Basically, you're storing cookies and retrieving cookies, right? You're storing cookies and retrieving cookies. One thing is we're encoding and we need to decode, just like it shows here in the W3 Schools code. So what's happening here? So they've written a function to basically pass in a name, and this is your cookie name. That's what this is. Let's just rename this so that it's more friendly for us when we do this thing together, right? I know, they call them cookies. I like them. I like the name eggplants and zucchinis tag. Well, I think those are better names than cookies. But anyways, so if I go to rename symbol here, let's rename this to cookie name so we see what it is. So it's more relevant to us. I'm going to break this function out so I can explain how this works to you, right? So it says, okay, cool. So here's our cookie name. we want to create our name, a variable. Let's not use var. Let's use let, because this is not good. It'll spill, right? So decode cookie, we're going to use decode URI document.cookie. Now document.cookie returns a string, but there's more than one, right? So we're going to get multiple document.cookies. For example, if I do a console log here of decoded cookie, and let's go back to this and console, right? Then username is equal to Tom is what we're going to get back, right? That's our decoded cookie. Username is equal to Tom, right? And because we're using this function, that's what's happening. So we're passing in Tom in there. Username name is equal to cookie name, right? Plus equals to, and then we're saying, okay, go take a look at this document.cookie. We haven't even looked at this yet, but decoded cookie is the one that we made, right? And then what it does is it creates a split like we saw earlier, where, okay, so it's a cookie array. That's what CA stands for, a cookie array, which is two parts, right? And we're splitting on our semicolon. So what it's basically doing is it's looking for every piece of the cookie array, and we're looking for the name index, the index name. So for every, so var in this case, so let the C is like the cookie part of the cookie array, right? For every cookie part of the cookie array, right? So in this case, it's the first part, the first element. Actually, this would be more like the element for every element in the cookie array. You probably could have done a for loop here, but what we have is a nested while loop inside the for loop. That's what they've done. That's fine. One thing I just don't like is the vars. We should change those to lets. And CA, these little kind of naming conventions they've used. If I was going to, say, let's rename this symbol to like kind of a cookie array. So the cookie array, and this is the element in the cookie array. For every element in the cookie array, this element here, so current element, or current cookie, if you will, or whatever you want to call it, component. Okay. So we can say, let's just call this component. Rename symbol. We'll call it component. So let component is equal to the cookie array. It's a cookie component, right? Cookie array 0, it starts with 0, right? For the cookie array length, we know that the length is only, there's only one object because we're splitting by semicolons, right? If I had more than one, I also have path, right? Because I split by semicolon here, right? Where path is equal to something, as an example. And if I wanted to make this all in one without encoding the name, I could say something that looks like this. Username is equal to Tom, path is equal to views, right? And if I was to go to the website and look at applications, still username is Tom, right, is there, okay? Let's get back to this. So the component itself is like each part. The name is the first part. So we're saying, well, the component character at 0 is equal to the first character of the component is a space. Then we want to get a substring. We want to return the component now has been changed so that we remove the space in front. If there's a space in front of the component, each part of the strings, remember a component breaks down into two strings, substring if you will, right? And then we're going to say if my component index of name, right, is equal to 0, then we're going to report. Index of name means find the name, and if it's not there, if there's no name, then return the component substring name.length and then component.length, whatever that is, right? Otherwise, if this doesn't happen, right, so this is for each of the components, right, for each of the components. And so what this does is it says, okay, get the name, substring the name length, right? And it going to return this part, a substring of the component, whatever it is, with a name, the index of name. I'm returning this much. Substring is how long it is, right? For the component length. So where it starts and where it ends. So I'm actually returning the name or the value of the name. That's what I'm doing. So what I'm looking for is to encode something and then decode it on the way back. And that's what this getCookie function does, right? It decodes it on the way back out. And what if I had more than one? So let's say, for example, I said my username is Tom, my path is views, or let's just say my username is Tom. And let's say we might have another cookie. And we'll stop for this after this today. We have another cookie, and my cookie is, we'll call it session 1. Then let me just not do this anymore. I don't think I've encoded it anymore. So if I go back out to we have two things. We have session, which is 1, and we have a username, which is Tom. Right now, you can see that that is what we have. And if I want to get the value of using getCookie, and again, I think W3 Schools did a pretty good job in putting in the cookie name. So let's say the cookie name is session. I want to get the value of the information that I've stored. Then I can get that. I can get it out. I can encode it on the way out. I can save it, and I can get it on the way back. And remember, this is stored in my browser. So when I log in and I successfully log in, I can store my username. And so I know that if the cookie exists, right, just like it shows here and there are examples online where I want to check to see if the cookie exists. So it says here, check a cookie to see if it exists, right? What is a cookie, right? And what this does is it goes out and sees what the cookie is. Now notice that there is a getCookie function, and they also created a setCookie function, right? And so what they've done is they've gone ahead and gone around some of the challenges we've been having, which is, hey, you know what? Let's make a set and getCookie function because this makes sense, right? And we can compose our cookie, as an example, by doing something that looks like this. Document.cookies equals CName, the cookie name, the C value, whatever the value is, when does it expire in a number of days, and what the path is. Notice that they include the semicolon in there as well, right? So I think this is a pretty good function too. Let's steal that one. So that makes it more doable, right? So here's getCookie. These are little utility functions. Then we'll make setCookie. We'll make them for us, and we'll be done. So again, I would probably rename this symbol to cookie name, and this would be rename symbol to cookie value, and this is expiry in days. So rename symbol expiry in days. Okay. I don't mind giving, big things here. Date. So var, we're going to kill vars and make them, we'll make them lets, and we'll rename this symbol to dates. Okay. And same thing with expires. Space it out a little bit so we can, and also format it properly so we can, if we want to change the signature of the function. That's why I always do this, guys, when I kind of put my curly braces underneath each other as opposed to format it under. Because then I can always just comment out the function header and change it to something else, right? So this makes more sense to me now. It's a little cleaner than what we had before. I've reformatted their code, modified what they have, stole it a little bit, and thank you very much, W3 Schools. And so then instead of doing this, we can do a sanitize. We can sanitize the cookies going in. So we can say something like, hey, let's set cookie. The cookie's name is going to be Tom. The cookie value, cookie's name is going to be username. The cookie value is going to be Tom, and a number of days it's going to expire. You're supposed to put in expiry date, how many days it expires. Expiries in days times 24 times 60 times 60 times 1,000. This is the number of milliseconds in a day. So expires in 1 day, right? Kind of stuff. And if I was to do this, and same thing with session, set cookie, we can call it session, and the value is 1 and expires in 1 day. And then let's take a look and see what that looks like in our browser. Right, so that's kind of how it works, and you can see Tom and 1. But what does it look like in the application? So username Tom, and this is what I was looking for: 2020 07/28, which is tomorrow UTC, and the same thing goes with our session. That's what I was hoping. One thing that's missing is the path, and so maybe one thing you can kind of put in here to modify this is the path. So you take in a path variable as well. We can set the default for the path is equal to slash. You can say that that is the path, right? And again, what you'd want to do is see if we can get that going too. So we can say that before we make the cookie, we can say that let path, we want to URL encode or URI encode that, right? Just like we did with the cookie name. We can URI encode it is equal to URI or encode URI component, and we want to pass in a string, which is the path. Right, so we take in the path, whatever that is, and we sanitize it, and then we add it on to the end. Right, so we say something like la 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 plus path, and hopefully that'll do kind of what I hope it's going to do. So by default, it's just the path slash, right? So that doesn't change anything. But what if I wanted another path? So let's say I want Tom only to work for, or session only to work for slash content. And let's see how that works. And it kind of didn't happen the way I was hoping. But anyways, there we go. But that's kind of how you would do it. You would sanitize this path content, and that's the way it would work. But still, it only lasts for 1 day. If I wanted to make it 2 days, you can see that that should also work. Didn't like that. I'm getting an error. Okay, let's take a look at the error that I'm getting. That's why. Uncaught identifier path has already been declared. Let path. Oh yes. Let path. We want this. Thank you. Application. Yes. 29 worked, but the path session didn't. I was hoping to see a path change there, but it didn't happen. All right, so we've covered how to create a cookie, how to modify a cookie, and how to read a cookie. And you probably are tired of cookies, and so am I. But I wanted to tell you that this is one way of it's a dangerous way of holding data. Notice that it's clear text. We haven't hashed it in any way. We don't have something that encodes it more than what we've used. We don't have some kind of weird hash that means something else. A lot of other things use cookies and sessions, and we'll talk about what those are as we explore more of this stuff on Wednesday. Okay, that's it for me today. Remember that you have an assignment that's due very, very soon. Please, if you haven't started working on it, please work on it. I may have a quiz on Wednesday, just letting you know, because we've covered a lot of information. I may do a quiz or some kind of lab. Okay, we'll see how it goes. It really depends on the time. Any questions before we end for the day? /contact. Path part could use the page name like /contact. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to do that, but it's not. I wonder if that's the reason, because it's not reacting properly. Yes. So what I was trying to do is exactly that. So /contact. Let's put it lowercase. But there is no page contact, right? I mean, there's only one page, right? But I'm wondering, even if I was to go to the contact us page, it doesn't really take away the cookie because there's only one. It's a single page application, right? That's the thing with this. So it would have to be like a subdomain. If I had like contact list as a subdomain, and because the way we're doing this, it could also be blocking what I'm doing. Anyone else have any questions? I'll put this up on GitHub, and then I will see some of you in a few minutes on the Linux side, where we're going to explore some interesting stuff. For the rest of you, thank you so much for attending. I do appreciate it, and I will see you shortly.